Good morning and welcome to the 13th meeting in 2026 of the Local Government Housing and Planning Committee. I remind all witnesses and members to ensure their devices are on silent. The first item on our agenda is a decision on whether to take item 3 in private. Are we all agreed? We're all agreed, thanks. Our next item this morning is consideration of the Non-Domestic Rates Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulations 2026 SSI 2026/135. And I remind those watching that this is a negative instrument and as such it is laid after it is made. It is subject to annulment by resolution of the Parliament for a period of 40 days beginning on the day it's laid. As agreed at our meeting on the 17th of March, the committee will today take evidence on the instrument from a panel of stakeholders, followed by the Minister for Public Finance. We'll then consider the instrument. In the first panel, we're joined by Fiona Campbell, who's the Chief Executive of the Association of Scotland Self-Caterers, Gary Clark, who's the Development Manager for East, Mid and South Scotland at the Federation of Small Businesses, and Leon Thompson, who's the Executive Director for Scotland at UK Hospitality. And I welcome you all to the meeting this morning. There's no need for you to turn your microphones on and off. We'll do that for you. And we're now going to turn to questions. So I've got an initial question that gives us a bit of context. So, and Leon, I'm going to direct it to you, but everyone else, you're welcome to come in. So it's just a general question out of interest of your thoughts on the number of businesses that will actually benefit from the measures introduced by these regulations.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. Business rates are really an ongoing concern for the hospitality sector. Every time we have a revaluation, we seem to sort of get into a situation where we have lots of reliefs being talked about and support measures being put in place, which I think really just underscores the fact that the system is not fit for purpose and actually largely just causes concern amongst certainly hospitality businesses. Hospitality businesses generally pay more in business rates than other types of businesses as well. This is largely to do with the way that the assessors calculate the rateable values for our businesses, basically trying to arrive at a kind of hypothetical rental value, which seems to push the revaluations much higher, the rates much higher for our businesses. We're always very welcoming of support that is provided by the Scottish Government. The transitional reliefs are complicated and I think it certainly takes a lot of time for businesses to actually work out how or if they will actually benefit in any kind of substantial way from those. The 40% relief that has been introduced is certainly very welcome, and initially that had been designated for licensed hospitality, but as a pan-hospitality trade association, we certainly welcome the fact that that appears to have been broadened out to all cafes and restaurants as well, not just those with alcohol licences. So that is good. However, the kind of sting in the tail here really is that it's capped for businesses with rateable values under 100,000, and that's a significant issue for businesses of really sort of any kind of type of scale, type of businesses that would be looking to invest and to grow, because fundamentally business rates are a block and a barrier on investment, also a block and a barrier on employment as well. So when a cap like that is introduced, it really means that we see our larger businesses picking up a much bigger share of the business rate charge. And the difficulty with that is we simply see businesses turning off investment and reducing employment opportunities.
Okay, thanks. Can I just come back to my question, which was, do you have a sense of the number of businesses that will actually benefit from the measures?
I don't have that, and with this instrument being laid, I mean, there's obviously now more businesses that will come into scope.
Okay.
But I think the key thing here is that there's a lot of businesses which are not going to receive any support at all.
Okay. Well, that's something that we can ask the Minister when he comes in. Does anyone else from your part of the sector have a sense of, Fiona, maybe do you have a sense of how many of your businesses will be benefiting?
I think the first thing I'd like to say is huge appreciation for the rates relief delivered by the Scottish Government and the Minister for the self-catering sector, because we did see an exponential increase in rateable values for our sector alone. And we saw an 80% increase of businesses that would go above the small business bonus scheme threshold. Now, since that has been delivered, the other good news is obviously that assessors have now come back and said that they're reducing the rateable values across the whole sector by approximately 20 to 25%. Again, incredibly appreciated. As a result of that, I don't have a figure, but the reality is that I was at a regional event with members last week, and due to the combination of the rates relief and the decrease in rateable value, many of our members are now seeing a significant amelioration in terms of what their bills will be. So we don't have a figure on it quite yet, but we will crunch that, absolutely for sure. And it would be great if the Minister could get that detail to us. But I would just like to say huge thanks. This is going to make a material difference to our sector, for sure.
Great, thanks. Gary?
Again, I would echo that that general feeling of welcoming this particular set of amendments, which do bring a bit of additional support that wasn't there following the revaluation and the subsequent budget. That said, the support that's on the table, 40% relief, many of those businesses already receive 40% relief. So is it much of a change from what they enjoy this current financial year? Also, I suppose you're looking at a situation where, for many in the sector, their valuations have gone up by an average of 28%. So whilst the relief itself is more valuable, their bills will probably still be going up. And as Fiona mentioned, the devaluation we've seen in the small business bonus, which is seeing, according to the Scottish Government's figures, around about 16,000 businesses drop out of support from that. Those businesses will now be paying something which they wouldn't have been doing this year. And obviously, the supports that they do receive through this set of amendments and other reliefs are far more complex than the reliefs they currently enjoy.
Okay, great.
Might I just come back in for a second, just to say that, again, while the reliefs are incredibly welcome, it does mean that many businesses are now just below the threshold of small business bonus scheme. So unless we go back and revisit the methodology, which we truly believe is flawed for the self-catering sector, truly flawed this year, that in 2029, when we come to the next revaluation, everybody's going to be dumped out of small business bonus scheme. And it does, the reality is that will render those businesses unviable. So it's about, if we want those businesses to close, if that's the policy intention, that's the reality of what's going to happen. So whilst the reliefs that have been delivered in this amendment are fantastic, it's not fixed the fundamental problem, which is the change in methodology for the self-catering sector.
Great, thanks. Yeah, probably good to put the government, whoever is governing the next session, on notice that something needs to be looked at before 2029. I'm going to bring in Megan Gallagher with a number of questions.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, panel. If I could start with the re-evaluation that happened and the disproportionate impact that had on hospitality premises and self-catering properties. So, Fiona, if I could maybe start with yourself on this. Do you think that the Scottish Government is perhaps treating hospitality and self-catering differently now? Or do you think there needs to be more of a push to help businesses within these particular types of premises?
I think that there's a general assumption that tourism and hospitality just happens. And unless we support the sector, then we are not going to see it just happening. We are going to see lots of businesses closing. And the repercussions for that across local communities and economies is going to be intense and remarkable. So unless there is some support and a real acknowledgement of what the hospitality and tourism sectors do for our communities and economies, then I think we're going to find ourselves in huge trouble. So I do think that the rateable values and the revaluations are critical in that support. And I think we welcome, of course, the GIL review, but I think that should be extended out to the self-catering sector, because as you've seen, you just have to look at figure 3 in terms of the Scottish Government's own data to see the enormous anomaly in rateable value increases for the self-catering sector. And that needs to be addressed. And absolutely, Convener, I agree, that needs to be addressed way before 2029 for sure.
Thank you very much for that. If I could move on to the re-evaluation itself and talk about the process and the methods. What needs to change? What do we need to change about the process and the methodology to conduct these valuations? What would be beneficial to the business sector? I don't know who wants to kickstart that, because I know it's a huge question.
In the first instance, for the self-catering sector again, and I'll leave my colleagues to talk about other sectors, there has been a complete change in methodology for the 2026 revaluation, and that has fundamentally, we did warn the assessors that if that were to happen, it would end up in an anomaly, and it has done. So whilst for the last decades, and I've been a self-caterer for 24 years, so I can attest to it, we have been assessed on merits of expenditure and receipts, so profit and loss essentially. This year it's based on rents. Now, as a sector, rents don't exist reasonably in our sector, and we've given untold levels of evidence on that to the Scottish Government and indeed assessors, which has resulted in these welcome amendments. However, we need to go back to an assessment that does work. And that is something that's not just the self-catering sector, it's across the board. We need to get to a 2026 and future-proof any future evaluations. And currently, they are decades old and simply aren't working. It is a system that is flawed and a system that is broken.
That's helpful. Thank you. Gary?
Yes, thanks very much. I mean, I would agree with that as far as the self-catering sector is concerned. I think there is a much wider issue as well, because in any revaluation you see winners and losers. In this revaluation we see 144,000 losers and only 40,000 winners. We have been through the Barclay Review just under a decade ago, where we assumed that by increasing the frequency of revaluations we would see less step changes happen. And yet, I'm speaking to a couple of businesses in Fife yesterday, an industrial unit and an office development, both of which are seeing increases of around about 65 to 70% in their valuations. They've had some engagement with the assessors on that, but one of the problems with the assessor system is that they're very local, and you see it done 14 different ways for the 14 different assessors across the country in many respects, and there's zero accountability as far as the assessors are concerned. So what we want to see more widely is a much greater increase in accountability within business rates, a much greater increase in transparency within business rates as to how decisions are reached. One of those members yesterday was telling me that their valuation had gone up to £32,000. The actual rental value of the property was less than £12,000. So the assessor, they've been in touch with the assessor hasn't justified that, hasn't even responded to it in any way. So we need a better system. We need a system where assessors can be held truly accountable. And we believe that ultimately it should be transferred across to Revenue Scotland to deliver, so that they can be accountable to the Scottish Government and to this Parliament.
And do you think that message has been heard by political parties or the Parliament as a whole?
It's certainly something we've been discussing with all of the political parties going into this election. But we do have, as Fiona and Leon have both said, we do have a very cumbersome system. For example, I've got a member in Bathgate, small retail store, currently this year under the threshold for small business bonus, so they don't pay any rates at all. As of next week, they will be just over the threshold for small business bonus. Now, what that means for that business is that they then will have to have revaluation transitional relief applied to them, which apparently is going to be applied automatically. They will then have to apply separately for small business transitional relief. They will have to apply for the small business bonus, although at a much reduced level, and they will have to apply for retail relief. So 3 different applications to apply for relief that this week they receive automatically. And even after those 3 applications and the 4 reliefs are applied to that business, they will still face a bill of over £1,000 this year, which will treble by 2028. That's not right.
No, it's not right. Leon.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, the issue is we have the assessors on one side and then we have the Scottish Government on the other. So, ultimately, who's responsible for, arriving at a fair outcome. In terms of, what would we like to see in terms of changes at UK Hospitality, we believe that actually the quickest way to deal with this is actually to introduce variable poundage rates, and then that way hospitality, for example, could be given a lower poundage rate, particularly at times when business is really very challenging, when we feel that that's the quickest way to fix this. The system we have at the moment is massive, it's hugely complex. I'm not sure there's a quick way to actually arrive at a new system for this. Fiona mentioned the Gill review, which we'll see Brian Gill, KC, leading a review team, looking at the methodology for licensed hospitality, which also includes hotels as well. Now, obviously, we don't know where that's going to go to. The review is looking for quite a lot of detailed information and commercially sensitive information as well, so businesses may feel that it's quite difficult for them to actually really sort of take part in that fully. We know that the Scottish Government has said that they will consider anything that comes out from the review in time for the revaluation in 2029, which really is quite a long way down the track. And for businesses which are really kind of struggling at the moment, that's not really sort of providing them with any certainty about what might happen at a future revaluation. Gary mentioned the Barclay review, and one of the key things there was to move from revaluation every 5 years to every 3 years. And the expectation certainly was that we might be able to kind of sort of ease out that those increases. We haven't seen that. One member I have got a 40% increase at the last reval, got another 40% increase this time around. So nothing's changed, and their turnover has not increased. So again, it's that whole issue of how are the assessors actually arriving at these valuations, and it's very unclear as to sort of how that works. We know that the assessors work to practice notes, which are publicly available. The practice notes are actually quite thin, quite scant, so it doesn't necessarily really give a lot of scope for kind of challenge back to the assessors. So there's a lot of issues within the current system that need to be looked at and addressed. I mean, in terms of what would the best system look like, the quickest way to deal with the issue is to look at the poundage rates. Can there be variable poundage rates to support hospitality?
That's very helpful, and again, it's good to have this on the record so the next parliamentary term can pick up your comments and hopefully do something positive in this space. Thank you very much, Convener.
Thanks very much. Evelyn.
Thanks, Convener, and good morning to the panel. It's good to see you here again. Gary, you were discussing the 100% small business bonus relief there and saying that some businesses are just falling out and not getting it anymore. Have you got a sense of how many businesses after 2026 revaluation are still going to get it?
I think the Scottish Government have said that the figure for receiving any kind of support under the Small Business Bonus Scheme is around about 100,000. But that compares to the current scheme where 100,000 businesses receive full 100% relief under the Small Business Bonus Scheme. So, according to the government's figures, about 16,000 businesses will drop out of all support under the Small Business Bonus Scheme. What we would argue is that at the time of the 2023, or prior to the 2023 revaluation, the Small Business Bonus threshold was £15,000. That's dropped to £12,000 in the 2023 scheme, and despite an overall increase in valuations of 12%, that's been held at £12,000. So that's a real terms devaluation of the Small Business Bonus Scheme, which has left at least, well, probably more than 16,000 businesses out of pocket.
And is it You gave the example of the business that had just fallen out of it. Is that a normal? Are businesses just falling out and then they have to go into this sort of?
Well, of course, I mean the way that the way that non-domestic rates work is that you've got three different pillars. You've got the assessors setting the rateable value. You've got government setting the poundage rate, and government then setting reliefs against the overall bills. It depends where the assessors calculate the rateable values, whether or not businesses will fall within or drop without the small business bonus scheme. But when you've got average rateable values increasing by 12% and the thresholds for small business bonus remaining static, you're going to have a significant number of businesses, at least 16,000 businesses dropping out of any support, and probably 16,000 businesses dropping out of full support.
It must be pretty scary if you're a business to have that relief and then just miss it. And then, as Leon had said, go into a myriad of different types of relief forms. How are we going to support businesses to get through the myriad of what they're going to have to do?
I think that's the difficult question, because I gave that example earlier on of the retailer in Bathgate. They've gone from having complete support, peace of mind, being able to plan, being able to recruit, knowing what their liability will be or otherwise for business rates. They're now into a system where they will be eligible for 4 different reliefs, but will still have a significant business rates bill. Now, councils are quite varied in terms of how much information they give to business owners about the different levels of relief. Now, all of us, sitting around here at the table today have a degree of knowledge of business rates. I don't think any of us would call ourselves experts by any means, but we probably know more than the average business does. And I get people come to me, for example, and say, what am I eligible for? And to be able to, as I did last week, try and explain, by the way, you'll be eligible for 4 different reliefs, but your bill will still be over £1,000. That's not where we should be in terms of business rates. We shouldn't have, relief after relief after relief after relief, which adds up to still a very disappointing position for the business, turning a zero rates bill into a significant rates bill, and actually even more than that as well, because rateable values are also used to calculate these businesses' water bills as well, and there's no reliefs against those. So if their rateable value increases by, in that case, 50%, but in many cases, I've got members in, let's say, 70%, North Lanarkshire 60%, Stirling 62%, one business in Kilmarnock 230%. There's no relief against the concomitant increases in their water rates as well. So they're actually seeing a huge increase in their cash liability at the worst possible time for many of these businesses.
Yep. It certainly sounds, until things are looked at again, that good guidance and being able to educate businesses about what they can get and in what way is going to be very important.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly all of us as business representative organisations, trade bodies, will try and make sure our members know as much as possible. But unfortunately, not every business, even in our sectors, are members of our own, and we do come across businesses who it simply slips past them because councils don't tell them about these things. They go on to, for example, again, there's 32 different local authorities here, so there are 32 different billing authorities for business rates. Well, probably 31 because Midlothian shared with Edinburgh. But there's all these different billing authorities charging businesses for rates. Not all of them even call these reliefs by the same name. So, a relief goes through Parliament, it'll be given a title, but sometimes a local authority might call it something slightly different. And that can confuse businesses even further in what is already a hugely complex and confused system.
So if I was a business owner and I had properties across a number of local authorities, I could be in the position where these reliefs are being called different names.
Yeah, and it would not be obvious. And some take the last revaluation, for example. Some local authorities, you were able to apply for small business bonus and small business transition relief in a single application. Some local authorities requested that you submit 2 separate applications. So, you know, as I say, in the case of that one retailer in West Lothian, that business will get one relief automatically, and that relief, that particular transition relief is measured against their gross rates bill. They need to apply for a separate relief, which is measured against their net rates bill. They need to apply for retail relief, and they need to apply for the small business bonus. It's needlessly complex. Yeah. And, you know, I dare say, you know, compared to where they might otherwise sit, it's, you know, it's generous by that measure, but it's needlessly complex for these businesses, and many businesses, unfortunately, will miss out as a result.
Okay, it's kind of depressing, but thank you.
Thanks very much. Seeing as we've gone into the complexity of everything, Mark, I believe you had interest in exploring that further, so over to you.
Yep. I mean, it's maybe more for the Minister just to relay your comments that you've made to him, because the Scottish Government's framework for tax, and I'm quoting, says that people and businesses should be able to understand the tax system. Now, what you've been setting out doesn't exactly set out a picture of clarity. So I guess my question is to you, what would you like me to put to the Minister regarding the clarity of the tax regime as it applies to your sector when you compare it with the Government's principle that people and businesses should be able to understand the tax system?
At the risk of hogging, I just want to make a really quick point on that, and I'll hand over to the others. A really quick point: if you want to ask the Minister something, ask him to see his worked examples for business rates, and then see if you can understand it.
I seem to constantly say 3 words, which are clarity, consistency and certainty. And as a small business, a small accommodation business, being told just before Christmas that your rateable value is going up from 6,600 to 31,600, when you've already set the rates for your accommodation for next year, isn't terribly stress-free. And then, brilliantly, the assessors then have reduced their rates back down to 11,600, which is wonderful news, but they don't know whether they're coming or going. So stress levels are enormous right now. As Gary says, it's very, very difficult for them to even slightly budget on these kind of basis. And again, as he also says, any rates relief is not going to help their water bills. So I was talking to a water company recently, and he said they are getting absolutely bombarded with people phoning them up and going, how dare you increase my water rates by double on the basis of what? What, you know, is it suddenly water with gold in it? No, it's just because the water rates have gone up. So it goes far beyond just your rateable value. It enters the entire kind of business operational level, which is unsustainable for these tiny, tiny businesses. So we've all set our accommodation rates wrong, and we're just going to have to suck it up. As Gary says, it's very, very difficult for people to understand. And, you know, the demographics of the self-catering sector is that 80% of self-caterers are women over 55. And I'm not putting them down in any way, shape or form, but if they are not members of the ASSE or the STA or any of the other trade bodies, they're not going to know how to assess, how to get these reliefs. And it's very, very difficult. And I would like to commend the non-domestic rates team, because they have sent out some very, very good guidance, which we are able to now distribute to businesses. But that being said, that only gets to the people that read what we put out. So it's incredibly difficult right now.
Yeah, I mean, the huge challenge, and Gary's referred to the worked examples for the transitional relief, which I've printed off and brought. I thought I might read them on the bus, see if I understood them any better on the way here this morning than I did when I was reading them at home the other week. But I mean, a lot of it is really quite impenetrable for businesses. And if you're taking examples of businesses that are coming out of the small business bonus scheme and then suddenly having to navigate their way through a system, for the very first time. It's a major, major challenge. I think I also want really to highlight the fact that we're obviously talking about business rates today, but this is just one tax that the businesses have to manage and have to pay as well. Employer national insurance contributions, we've seen rises there, which has hit all sectors, but it's hit hospitality particularly hard. We've obviously got the second highest rates of VAT anywhere in Europe as well. There's obviously issues around pay that need to be kind of navigated in terms of national living wage and so on. So there's a lot of cumulative costs that businesses have to grapple with, and each of those can come with their own complexity that businesses need to find their way through as well. So I mean, really anything that can be done to improve how the business rates system functions would be welcome. And I mean, the kind of last thing from me in terms of my 3 words, I think when we get to talking about tax, we just want tax to be proportionate, fair and predictable. And actually what we have with business rates is probably none of those.
Okay, thank you.
And Alexander, you had some interest here.
I do, thank you, Convener, and thank you. Back in January, when the Scottish Government set the budget, you as individuals representing your organisations or trade bodies raised huge alarm bells about the impact and the concerns that this would have on the sector. And as I say, all credit to you for doing that. But to what extent do the regulations that we're looking at now actually manage to deal with the concerns that you raised? Or are there still areas that have been left that you believe the government have not as yet tackled? And it would be good to get a flavour of what you all think of that. So back in January, you set the alarm bells ringing, and we're now in a state of play, but is it still not covering all you require, or will the regulations manage to deal with some of the things that you asked for and the concerns you raised back then? Maybe I'll start with Fiona.
Thanks very much indeed. I think that the important and critical point here is that the reliefs are very welcome. However, the reliefs are a sticking plaster when actually the leg is broken. Okay. So we need to go back and look at the methodology. And whilst I appreciate that the assessors are independent, the Scottish Government does have jurisdiction over the methodology. And I think that's where we would like the Scottish Government to step in and actually commit to a review as per the Gill review. And it's critical that the Scottish Government and the assessors and any independent KC that comes in to review anything works with industry to find a way forwards. Because right now, the methodology is broken. Reliefs are wonderful, but they are an admission that the system is broken. We don't want to rely on reliefs. There shouldn't be reliefs. If a system is proportionate and sensible, there wouldn't be any reliefs because it would just work. So I think this is a bigger, more systemic problem that needs to be addressed, and we're really, really keen to do that with the next Scottish Parliament.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll come in. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're in a better position than we were when the Scottish budget came along. That's for sure, and that is absolutely welcomed. But the difficulty is we're still leaving medium-sized businesses without any kind of support at all. So, I mean, a lot of businesses, because of the revaluations, will have been pushed up above the 100k threshold this time around, so they won't get 40% relief. Now, these businesses don't necessarily think of themselves as being big businesses. They're still, reasonably small, family-owned and operated businesses, but they're left without support with these changes. And we also then have the higher property rate as well, which is, particularly challenging. As well. So there's a lot there in terms of businesses that are waiting to invest, that can invest, that will be unable to do so because of the lack of support and because of the increases that they're seeing in their rateable values this time round.
And it comes back to the question: what is a priority for you as a sector and industry? You've already indicated what is required, and you've been given some relief. But it is only some relief at this stage. So the sector is still in a critical or a difficult place. And to try and plan for the future, you need the government to give more support, more advice and more stimulation to the sectors that you have. And do you think that's going to happen with these regulations? Or, as you said earlier, Fiona, it's just a sticking plaster that's going to cover, but it's not going to secure and it's not going to change any of them?
I think the problem being, certainly for the self-catering sector, given that the methodology is completely flawed,
Yep.
in our opinion, and in the opinion of our independent assessor that's reviewed it, if we don't do something substantive about it between now and 2029, the only way is up. The likelihood of rateable values decreasing significantly is almost zero. So unless we address it substantively and holistically now, we're going to end up in a position where the last rate revaluation was a huge increase across Scotland, average of about 60% for all properties. This year it's 88%. What will it be in 2029? So again, we don't want reliefs abate. These are incredibly helpful. We want a review of the methodology. We're not trying to avoid taxation, but it has to be a fair system that we understand. And we understand what we're supporting by giving these taxes as well. That would be helpful.
Okay, Gary, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I mean, I think these measures within these regulations, do provide a measure of much needed support for these sectors. But, Federation of Small Businesses, we represent many other sectors, and many of those sectors are seeing bills increase by 50 to 100% as well. So, while, Scottish Government has clearly come into a small sum of cash as a result of consequential funding, which has made these regulations possible for the hospitality and self-catering industry, all they're kind of doing by that is providing a bit of extra relief for hospitality and providing, as Fiona has already amply explained, help to sort out a really specific and egregious problem within the self-catering sector. So it's touched on two issues, but there's many other issues out there. And certainly prior to the budget, after the revaluation, many people in the property sector were expecting a much lower poundage rate than the 48.1 pence that was eventually announced in the budget. I think the expectation was it would be nearer 45. So that would have provided a bit more relief across a wider range of sectors. But given the extra money that the Scottish Government had at its disposal, it's clear why it would seek to target support on these sectors, because they have been harder hit on average than other sectors. But there's other businesses out there who could really do with this support or do with extra support, but aren't getting it and are finding it really difficult to plan. So, I've got members, a member in Fife who may close down one of their businesses because they won't be able to afford the business rates for that particular property, and they hadn't budgeted for it. I've got another business in Murray who was hoping to expand into self-catering, actually, and has put the kibosh on that for reasons of business rates and other issues within that sector as well, who've pulled the plug on that. And another business in Murray, I mean, we've touched on the water bills issue as well. A business that doesn't even pay, even under the new system, doesn't pay any rates at all, thanks to the small business bonus, but is seeing its water bill treble as a result of changes to its rateable value. So, yes, these measures are welcome, and they work to a certain extent, but there's far bigger issues, as Fiona has outlined.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks very much. I don't think we've got any other questions from any. Yeah, come on.
Thank you again, Convener. Just because we've been speaking about the Guild Review this morning, because a lot seems to hinge on the Guild Review coming out with the right outcomes. It's going to support businesses across all of the various different sectors that you represent. Would you welcome a future committee looking at the Guild Review in detail to make sure that assurances are being sought along the process in terms of the review, to make sure that there's not any surprises at the end of it, to make sure businesses are fully aware and involved in the process as well? Leon, I see you nodding, so I'll come to you first. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we would want a reasonable amount of scrutiny on this. I mean, looking at the the information that's being sought. I can see where the review is going. The remit is very tight, is very constrained as well. So I think if there can be sort of further discussion once the review is actually published, then that's all to the good. But obviously we're really just kind of starting out on this at the moment. We need to wait and see what Brian Gill and the team come up with this year.
Thank you.
Just to flag that the Gill review is only, as I understand it, reviewing licensed trade, so that doesn't help us.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just to clarify, that doesn't help the Association of Scottish Self-Caterers. So there's something else that needs to happen in that space.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming in and pressing the ideas of clarity, consistency, and the need for certainty and proportionality, fairness, and predictability going forward. Very much appreciate hearing from all of you. Thanks very much. I now suspend the meeting to allow for a changeover of panel. We're now joined by the Minister for Public Finance, Ivan McKee, who's accompanied by his officials, Anouk Berthier, who is the Head of Non-Domestic Rates Policy, and Susan Robb, who's a solicitor. And I welcome you all to the meeting, and thanks for joining us. There's no need for you to operate your microphones. We'll do that for you. And I now invite the Minister to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Committee. And I'm pleased to join you today to assist in member scrutiny of the Non-Domestic Rates Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulations 2026 that provide for an additional 25% relief to eligible licensed premises and music venues, including pubs, restaurants, hotels, nightclubs and licensed clubs, liable for the basic or intermediate property rate, those with a value up to and include £100,000, which was announced by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Local Government on 12th February at stage 1 of the Budget Bill. Together with the 15% retail, hospitality and leisure relief announced at the budget for properties liable for the basic or intermediate property rate, this takes the total relief for eligible licensed hospitality premises and music venues to 40% for the next 3 years, capped at £110,000 per business per year. The instrument also provides for a specific revaluation transitional relief for self-catering holiday accommodation with the requisite licence to operate, capping annual increases in gross liabilities for those seeing the highest increases in rateable values at revaluation at 15% year on year up to the next revaluation. I met with the Non-Domestic Rates Consultative Group immediately after the Chancellor announced the additional support for pubs in England to hear businesses' views and suggestions, and we took on board what they told us and reacted to support their suggestions in that regard, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thanks very much. Just as a kind of beginning context-setting question, I'd be interested to have a sense from you of the number of businesses that will actually benefit from these measures introduced by the regulations.
Question, do we have that number to hand? We can dig that out for you while we are while we're talking, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yes, we're happy to confirm that exact number in writing. What we can say, though, is that we estimate around half of the properties in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors will continue to be eligible for the small business bonus, for 100% small business bonus scheme relief, and that a further 37,000 properties could benefit from mainland retail, hospitality and leisure relief or licensed hospitality relief. So that's all RHL mainland relief, but we can confirm the exact number of the 40% relief in writing.
Okay, thanks very much. Now I'm going to bring in Megan Gallagher with a number of questions. Megan.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Minister and officials. I'd like to begin with the 2026 re-evaluation, because that's why we're here, and of course substantive moves have had to be made in order to provide businesses with relevant relief. But as we've heard just in the panel before, this one, they say that it is a sticking plaster really to bigger work that really needs to be undertaken in this space. So I would like to hear firstly from the Minister his views on the current process and the methods to conduct valuations, and is it time for a bigger change?
Well, you've got to look at this in context. There was the Bartley Review a number of years ago, which indicated came forward a number of proposals which have been largely taken forward. And, for example, the 3-year revaluation and the 1-year tone date was supported by business organisations, as were many of the other measures that were introduced at that time. If you look at this in terms of the context over the last few cycles, at the moment we're in a position where the total rates bill levied on businesses is 6% less in real terms than it was pre-COVID, despite there being more businesses paying eligible for rates. So that shows that far from the tax being ramped up, it's actually taken a lower toll on businesses across the piece. Now, of course, businesses always not want to pay rates, so we'll always have these conversations no matter what the system, no matter what the extent of the reliefs in place is. But I think the government's been very clear to listen to what businesses have to say and to come forward with relief proposals and reductions where that makes sense. Indeed, the total amount of relief for next year is £830 million, so it's not an insignificant amount of money we're putting into the system. And as I say, whatever way you work through this, if you're going to have a rate system that levies property-based charges on business to support public services, then you're always going to have people who think they should be paying less. Of course, as you're with any tax system. And it's also important to recognise that the way the rates package is in total is assessed. It works on the basis of it being revenue neutral over the revaluation period. So it isn't a case that that bill has been hiked up on average over the piece, but of course there'll be some that will be paying more and quite a lot that are paying less as well.
I thank the Minister for his response there, but I think the context in which we are in just now, you've got cost of living, which of course is on everyone's minds at present, but you've also got other issues such as water bills, which were raised by the panellists in the previous session that we've just had. So does the Minister understand that there's a varying different context here in relation to the amount of pressure that's being put on businesses just now, and of course the re-evaluation of rates is just exacerbating that problem?
Well, as I say, the total amount has been gathered through that process is revenue neutral over that revaluation period. So there are people who are paying more and there are people who are paying less. And as I say, if you look back historically compared to pre-COVID, which isn't that long ago, we're now the total revenue raised through rates is 6% less in real terms than it was then. So if anything, the rates bill in reality has been reduced on business over that period. Now we recognise that businesses face a whole range of challenges, be it on VAT, on employer national insurance contribution increases, on energy bills, etc., etc. But if we're going to have a system that raises money through a property-based tax on business to support and pay for public services, then, as I say, you'll always be in a position where there'll be people who say that they should be paying less than they're being asked to pay. And the assessors go through a rigorous process of evaluating what the rateable value of a business should be based on a range of factors which are all very well documented, and there's an extensive process for appeals to that if businesses feel that their rates either individually or indeed as a sector, as you've heard already this morning from different sectors, there needs to be a reassessment of that, and the assessors are very responsive to those discussions.
Thank you. Through these regulations, it appears that the Scottish Government has treated licensed hospitality premises and self-catering properties differently from other types of property. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, well, we meet very regularly. I meet very regularly with the NDR Consultative Group, which has got representatives of different sectors on it, and we met both before and after the UK government and the Scottish, UK budget and the Scottish budget, and when it became apparent that there was potentially movement, because it wasn't clear at that point, but there was potentially movement from the UK government with regards to additional support for businesses south of the border, asked the question of the group how they thought, if it came to pass, we should spend that money. So clearly committed on our part to make use of all of any consequentials that came as a result of any decisions by the UK Chancellor, and the group was quite clear that there was a need to support licensed hospitality, and there was also recognition that the self-catering properties were suffering a significant increase on average, and we took steps to put the caps in place to support that sector as well.
Thank you. Fiona Campbell said in the previous panel that there is sometimes the opinion that tourism and hospitality just happens. Is that something that the Scottish Government sometimes takes for granted? And is it something that we need to look at to make sure hospitality businesses are better supported?
No, of course not. That's exactly why we've done what we've done, by putting in place those caps on increases on the self-catering premises. It's why we've engaged very extensively with the sector, the tourism sector, on the changes we've made, which are finalised today, if it passes through Parliament, on the visitor levy amendment bill, where I think the sector has indicated publicly that they're very, very happy with the level of engagement and support they've had from the government in taking those measures forward. And say we've got extensive engagement to work with the sector to respond to issues that it raises with us.
Thank you. And then finally, on the GIL review, so that, of course, is the review of valuation methodology used to assess the rateable values of self-catering and hotel properties. But this, of course, won't extend to looking at revaluation within other types of business. So again, I'll ask the question to the Minister, do you think it's time that we need to expand and look at revaluation across the sector?
Well, as I said earlier, we had the Bartley Review specifically to look at the NDR system a number of years ago, and took those recommendations largely forward. The specific issue with licensed hospitality is as a result of that sector specifically asking that they felt that the methodology that was used for businesses in that sector they felt could be done differently. Other sectors haven't come forward with the same challenges with regards to methodology. I think the self-catering sector, as a result of this valuation, which is a more recent issue, has seen a change in the methodology, and we've had engagement with them on that. But certainly with regards to the licensed hospitality, that's a sector that over a period of time has been making the point that they feel that this needed to be looked at, and we have responded to that and set up the Gill Review. But as I say, at the end of the day, if you are running a rate system that's revenue neutral over the cycle, then you can absolutely look at the methodology, but on average, of course, it's going to mean that if some pay less, potentially some are going to be paying more.
Thank you, Minister. And sorry, Convener, just before I pass over, the Gill Review, of course, is for the licensed hospitality sector,
Yeah.
and I was asking if there should be a case made for the self-catering sector, but thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks very much. We're now going to bring in Evelyn Tweed. You don't have any questions, okay? Alexander.
Thank you. Minister, we are aware that the sector made some very strong representation to you once the budget in January was actually brought forward. They raised alarm bells and had major concerns about what the sector and the impact would be. And you've taken on board some of that, as we've already discussed today. But this actual, to what extent do you think the regulations we're now going to lay actually do manage to contain and look into the concerns that were expressed?
Well, the sector, you're talking about the sector, you're talking about the licensed hospitality sector, which we've actually taken quite a broad definition of. That's broader than what they've taken down south in terms of how many businesses are covered by that 40% reduction. Is quite significant. And there's fair to say like there's anyone else getting a 40% reduction in their rates bill. So it's quite a significant undertaking from the government that's going to cost £320 million over the cycle to support that. So I think that is a fair response to the concerns raised by the sector to be able to support them, because we recognise that there are other costs. But I think it's also important to recognise that there's all sectors by and large are paying rates, and other sectors are also impacted by cost of living challenges as well.
And you know, they expressed the difficulties that they have to deal with on others, and they made an example about water rates has a massive impact on them as well. So when you identify the cost of living crisis and the way that things are, the sector gets a number of increases across the piece that have a detrimental effect on their survival or on their viability as a business. And you have taken on some of those concerns, as was expressed earlier. The sector said in the panel we just had that it was a sticking plaster over a broken leg. That's how they gave an analogy.
Well, as I've said, previously we've been very engaged with the sector. If you're talking about the licensed hospitality sector in particular, about their concerns about methodology. And to be honest, I mean, I've raised this issue a number of times with the NDR group, which represents a number of sectors, and said if you want to come forward with proposals as for us to how differently spend, as it was last year, the £750 million we put in reliefs, that's got up to £830 million for this coming year. I'm very open to hear suggestions as to how we might want to spend that money differently. But I've said earlier, no matter how much we charge for rates, there will always be people who say it's too much. Of course there will, because that's in the nature of doing business. Of course it is. So I think we're taking significant steps and putting in very significant amounts of money to support the sector, and the Gill Review has been set up specifically to assess if there are alternative methodologies that can be used. But as I say, whatever we come forward with, I'm sure there'll be those who will say that it should be done in a different way.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks very much. Willie, come on in.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Minister and your colleagues. The businesses across my constituency, pubs, cafes and restaurants, will be really pleased with the announcement you've made, making it 40%. Doesn't please everybody, of course, but by and large, most of the businesses, I think, will be pleased with that. What they're still saying to us, of course, is that the impact of the assessor re-evaluations are pretty severe. But also the elephant in the room in terms of the hospitality sector is the impact of national insurance contributions in that, which isn't a part of this instrument, but it's having a huge impact on the sector. Is the Scottish Government intending to, at some point, to assess the impact of this on the hospitality sector in particular, just to see what the effect is, and will that feed into the Gill review?
Well, two separate things there, but in terms of the UK Government's measures on increases in employers' national insurance, we've done extensive work on that. The impact it has on the private sector, on the third sector, on the public sector and the private sector. In different parts of the private sector, that work was done previously when those measures were taken forward, and of course it has a significant impact on businesses, particularly in the sectors we're talking about today. The Gill review will be quite focused on what is the best methodology for licensed hospitality, so it's fairly focused in that regard, and it will be interesting to see what they come forward with. They're taking extensive input from the sector, and the review itself is staffed by individuals that have got extensive experience in assessing businesses for rates. So it'll be interesting to see what they come back with, and we look forward to seeing their recommendations.
Thanks. And have any of the pubs in your constituency invited you in for a pint yet to celebrate this particular good news?
No, and I'm not sure whether it, in terms of hospitality, corporate hospitality, or call it hospitality, that would there's clearly lines there that we need to observe.
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring in Mark Griffin with some questions around the complexity of the system.
Yep, I mean, the previous panel, it's fair to say, were very complimentary around the package of release for the sector this year, but did raise issues around complexity and understanding of how the various different parts of the system are implemented and understood. The Scottish Government's tax framework says that people and businesses should be able to understand the tax system, and we have a worked example of how the various reliefs operate in practice. And if I could run through that, Convener. So a business, a self-catering property with a new rateable value of £15,000, so pushing it over the small business bonus, they get a revaluation transitional relief of 15%. Then they qualify for another 25% relief through a small business bonus scheme. Then another 15% through the retail, hospitality and leisure relief. Then they qualify for a further reduction in the small business transitional relief. It seems at odds with the government's ambition that people and businesses should understand the tax system, and I wonder if the government have given any thought to how they could simplify all those very welcome reliefs as the sector have set out, and make that clearer and easier for those businesses to be able to access those.
Well, there's a few things there. So first of all, I think it's clear, right? So I don't think there's anything there that isn't clear in terms of how it's calculated, and you just walk through yourself, which is different from it being complicated. But I'll come out and talk about that in a minute. And I suppose there's two parts to that. That's how the assessment is done of the rateable value of an individual property. And again, I think that's clear in terms of the methodology that the assessors use is published, and they work through that for several 100,000 businesses to arrive at numbers for each business based on a range of factors. But again, depending on the sector, the information and the methodology that they use is clearly communicated. So there's nothing there that isn't available for individual businesses and organisations to see. When it comes to the reliefs, I think you've answered your own question. If those reliefs weren't there, then clearly businesses would be unhappy. And we've had a number of, because they'd be having to pay significant higher rates bills, and we've had a number of questions this morning round about individual different sectors which are more challenged by economic factors and indeed by the rates increases than others. So as a consequence of that, we've put in place targeted reliefs, be it on islands, be it on remote rural, be it on different sectoral reliefs, be it on businesses who are feeling the shock of moving from small business bonus eligibility to not being in that position. So I think the package of reliefs that we've put in place is important, but by its nature, it's going to be complicated. And I don't think there's any getting away from that, given the need to have it targeted where we and indeed business organisations think it needs to be targeted, and dealing with businesses that are in transition, either as a consequence of an increase in their rateable value or moving out of the small business bonus scheme. But as I say, if there are proposals as to how to continue to have a targeted system that supports businesses in transition, but to do it in a less complicated way, then I'm all ears, because myself and certainly the officials that need to do the calculations would be delighted to make it simpler.
So the members in the previous panel made the point that, you know, they have difficulty going through these different reliefs and how they're applied, and, you know, they regularly engage with government, and just questioned how a non-representative, someone who wasn't a member of a representative organisation, what is the general level of awareness of all the different reliefs, how they operate and how they apply to their own businesses?
Well, the team have put together at that pace, because a lot of this stuff happened as we made the budget announcements, and as we heard from UK government what their changes were and how much we had to allocate through those additional reliefs. The team have worked at pace to put ready reckoners out there, so businesses that are in a particular situation can log on, dial in, put their numbers in, and see what the impact on their individual circumstances is. So that methodology is there. But as I say, you can't have it both ways. You can't ask for targeted reliefs and reliefs to support businesses in transition, and then at the same time say there's too many reliefs. As I say, there's a proposal on how to simplify that, then I'm very keen to do it. But I think if we made any changes to that, you would rightly have sectors or businesses in particular circumstances raising issues about the fact that they were being losing out on some of those reliefs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Just before I bring in Evelyn Tweed, just on that, you talked about the calculator, online calculator. A point was raised in the previous panel about a concern that if businesses were not part of a member body that was supporting them, how would they find out that they're eligible for the relief? So is the government taking on board that kind of thing and really communicating to everyone that's running business that they've got these tools that they can use?
Yeah, there's 2 points. There's a tool to calculate what you think you're eligible for, and then there's a process of applying for the relief. But I'll let Anouk answer on the specifics on the application for relief.
Yes, so it is correct that we have a non-domestic rates calculator which takes into account the small business bonus scheme. We have shared a large number of worked examples with stakeholders and councils, and these will be published in a local government finance circular in April, which will be publicly available, and we will share it, of course, again with all our stakeholders and point people to it when they ask questions. If I can just come back on the transitional reliefs, as the Minister explained, these seek to support the greatest number of businesses from cliff edges, be that from revaluation itself, which is where the revaluation transitional relief comes in, or losing some reliefs, including the very generous 2023 small business transitional relief, which a lot of businesses are still benefiting from this year. So the 2026 small business transitional relief will ensure a progressive phasing in of bills to what they would have been without this relief by the end of the revaluation cycle. So it will hopefully be possible to design a potentially simpler system at the next revaluation, subject to what ministers, of course, want to do. I can also confirm that we estimate up to around 6,500 businesses will benefit from the extra, from the 40% relief, so the extra 25% relief for eligible properties, in response to your first question.
Great, thanks very much. That was very speedy to get that response. Evelyn, you want to come in?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a point that I had asked to the last panel, and it was about it's how we simplify the system. Because obviously if you're a business, and in fact you've got businesses across different local authorities, and the panel members were saying it's incredibly difficult because local authorities provide very different guidance. Sometimes they're calling reliefs different names. Is there any way that we could provide streamlined guidance across local authorities that use the same, even the same terminology? Because if you're a business owner and you've got businesses in various places across Scotland, it must be incredibly confusing.
Well, in terms of the terminology, I mean, that's laid out, 'cause it's what the Scottish Government calls it. If councils are choosing to call it something different, then we can obviously advise them that that's not helpful. But the Scottish Government, the terminology is the terminology we use in the budget bill and these instruments that we're taking forward, of course. And we do produce guidance to local authorities to lay out what's how they should be communicating that. But I go back to the point about complexity. I mean, we don't put in complexity because we enjoy complexity. We put it in response to businesses asking for reliefs in various different circumstances that they judge to be important to those businesses. At the end of the day, it's fairly straightforward. You get your rates bill and you pay your rates, but the relief package, which is extensive, as I said, at more than £800 million, is to support businesses so that they have to pay less, which I think is what's important to them. But in terms of the guidance that's issued to councils, do you want to maybe just talk to that?
Yes, so as mentioned, we do publish annual non-statutory rates relief guidance, which we work on with councils, including the worked examples that we share iterations of. All of the councils know that we publish this guidance, and that hopefully has consistent naming that they can adopt. We also share suggested application forms, which they can take some parts of, if they wish, in their own application forms to assist with consistency across Scotland.
So can I ask, will all that guidance be updated given, you know, where we are now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it reflects the latest situation, yeah. And as a representative from COSLA sits on the NDR consultative group alongside the assessors plus all the different business sectors that sit on that group. So there's an opportunity for these conversations to be had directly between the business organisations and local authorities and the assessors in that forum, which we hold every couple of months, 2 or 3 months, yeah. And that engagement takes place, so there are plenty of opportunities for people to raise these issues on an ongoing basis.
I think that concludes our interest in this area. I really appreciate you all coming this morning to give evidence, and we're going to just keep going, so you can. Thank you very much. Yes, very much. Yeah. Very much appreciated. That's right, we won't.
I hope not. So thank you very much.
It's been good working with you.
Given there's only a day left to go.
Cheers.
Bye now.
We now turn to consideration of the instrument. Do members have any comments they wish to make on the instrument? No? I mean, I just want to say, not necessarily on the instrument, but I think it was constructive to have that conversation and hopefully encourage early action in the next session. So is the committee agreed that we don't want to make any recommendations in relation to the instrument? Okay, we're agreed. Thank you. I just want to take a moment before I close the meeting to thank everybody for being fantastic members on this committee. It's been really super to work with all of you. I know not all of you have been here for the whole time. Some of you have come and gone. Some of you have come newly. I really appreciate Willie and Mark being with me the whole time through here. I also want to express my appreciation to the Clarking team, again, changing, but always felt incredibly supported by all of you, and to our 3 phenomenal researchers at SPICE, helping us out with papers and information in local government, housing and planning. I think that's helped us immensely. And I also want to thank our communications team as well for helping us spread the good word of our work to broader than this committee room, and broadcasting as well, and also thanks to the background support of hospitality that keeps us nourished and fed and brings the coffee, and also to the security team that keeps us safe. So, yeah, really has been an incredible experience to be the convener of this committee, and thanks all very much for that. Okay.
I think, Gary, on behalf of the committee members, we'd like to thank you for your stewardship of the committee over the years that you've handled this. It's been first class, and it's actually provided a huge level of scrutiny to the Scottish Government, which is right and proper and very thorough. So on behalf of our colleagues around the committee, so thank you for your convenership of this committee.
Thank you very much, Philly. And I really appreciate you being a great deputy. It's been really great to have your steady hand. I have said that to you before, but I'll say it again. So that concludes the public part of our meeting, and we'll move into private.